Good evening, brothers and friends. It is very nice to see each and every one of you again this evening. And for those of you that are joining us for the first time, I welcome you to the series Discovering Freemasonry, brought to you by the Rubicon Masonic Society. And on behalf of the Rubicon Masonic Society, I want to again thank you very much. And this is the Thanksgiving holiday week in the United States, and I want to offer our sincere, heartfelt gratitude and appreciation for your support of our educational series. A lot of work does go into this behind the scenes, and seeing your attendance during these meetings and these evenings is very heartwarming and appreciative. So thank you for joining us. Tonight is part 6 of our 8-part virtual Masonic education series entitled Discovering Freemasonry. Gentlemen, this setting is aimed to be very instructive, with a progressive focus of a man's journey through Freemasonry from beginning to present day. The Rubicon Masonic Society, if you are unaware, is an invitation-only private group of Master Mason Freemasons located in Lexington, Kentucky. The purpose of the Rubicon Masonic Society is to establish a deeper understanding and connection with Freemasonry, with its traditions and with its practices, thereby further cementing the brotherhood of its members and guests through conviviality and unity outside of the normal lodge setting. My name is Brian Evans, and I'm humbly the chairman of the Rubicon Masonic Society. Throughout this series, you will meet many members within Rubicon, as well as various special guest appearances from Masons who will be sharing their personal experiences and knowledge about specific topics within our fraternity. My co-hosts, as usual, are Worshipful Brother Dr. John W. Bizak, who is also a past master and vice chairman of the Rubicon Masonic Society, as well as Worshipful Brother Dan Kimball, past master and honorary member of the Rubicon Masonic Society. Without these two wise men, these series probably wouldn't be possible. Again, thank you for joining us this evening. Let us begin. Worshipful Brother Lyle Van Outer, chaplain of the Rubicon Masonic Society, will you please deliver the opening devotion this evening?
Of course. Brothers, let us pray. Great architect of the universe, be present in the hearts and minds of all those present. Grant that what transpires during this education series be a light to the faithful among all faiths that honor God through service and devotion to the unity of all mankind and to all existence. Invest all those who speak and ask questions with a pure understanding of your divine wisdom and the ability to communicate and realize the principles of our order. May we succeed by the honor of your holy name. Amen.
So mote it be. Thank you, Worshipful Brother. Brothers and friends, the agenda this evening is the same as it has been, and I know some of this gets repetitive, but for those who are new, it's important that we outline the agenda and the protocol. In a moment, we will discuss and provide the outline, the purpose, and protocol for these meetings. We will then proceed directly into part 6 of this 8-part series. Following the presentation, we will open up the meeting to all attendees for the discussion and question and answer period, which has become one of the most enjoyable part of our meetings for myself as well as most other attendees. Following the discussion period, we will provide details on future education as well as final comments in preparation to closing. Worshipful Brother Kimball, will you please begin by reading the disclaimer for all of our attendees, please?
Gladly, brother. There is a tremendous amount of misinformation about Freemasonry that currently exists in both virtual and non-virtual forms. Only factual information capable of being independently verified and consistent with the accepted academic research standards will be presented in this series. While the information presented during this series will be factual, any opinions expressed during the various presentations will be those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the views of any lodge or Grand Lodge or the Rubicon Masonic Society. All material contained in this presentation is suitable for Masons and non-Masons. No private information, including but not limited to passwords, signs, grips, or other elements of Masonic ceremonies will be disclosed during any part of this virtual series. By participating in this virtual meeting, you consent to the use of your name, likeness, and voice by the Rubicon Masonic Society. This entire presentation is the property of the Rubicon Masonic Society and may not be used without the written permission of the Rubicon Masonic Society.
Thank you very much, Worshipful Brother. Worshipful Brother Bizak, will you please deliver the purpose of our series to our attendees?
Thank you, brother. Brothers and friends, the purpose of this educational series is to deliver a factual and foundational overview of our honorable fraternity, beginning with the man's initial contact with the fraternity, his progression through the degrees and the life path of a man as a Freemason in his pursuit to improve himself by learning and by applying on a daily basis the lessons and the tools of our craft.
Thank you, Worship Brother. Brothers, as you know, these are not tiled meetings. Masons as well as non-Masons are welcome to attend and participate. Therefore, please, I ask everyone to be mindful that anything discussed this evening must be suitable for Masons of all degrees, as well as non-Masons. Gentlemanly manners are to be expected at all times. There will be no alcohol, no smoking, no food, or foul language to be permitted. There will also be no discussion of politics or religion at any time, and any attendees not following protocol may be removed. In an effort to best ensure that this virtual meeting is as enjoyable as possible, the following recommendations are being made. It is recommended that the attire for each meeting be a coat and tie. Please type your name, the lodge you are from under your picture or video so that other attendees can identify who you are. Please be patient should any technical difficulties occur. Please enable your video camera so all other attendees can see you. Please reduce background noise and keep your microphone muted when not speaking. If we have to mute your microphone, we will do so. Please turn off all other computer programs and try your best to eliminate any outside distractions in your environment. As stated, the title of our 8-part Masonic education series is Discovering Freemasonry. And upon our studies and surveys in and outside of the Rubicon Masonic Society, we have consistently learned that new and even veteran Masons were never provided an explanation of the fundamentals that can be delivered in a basic overview such as this, hence the birth of this educational series. So far, we have discussed what is Freemasonry, the path to becoming a Freemason, the entered apprentice degree, the fellowcraft degree, and the Master Mason degree. And tonight we dive into a topic that I'm very much looking forward to discussing, and that is the legend of Hiram Abiff. Please understand that in the period of time allotted within these episodes, it's impossible to discuss and cover every specific detail and part within this type of education. However, we encourage you to remember and not assume that all men enrolled are in the same level of Masonic instruction as perhaps yourself. And again, some may not be Masons at all. While some participants will undoubtedly desire more in-depth discussion, others may be encountering some or all of this information for the first time. And with that being said, tonight, we will be discussing, as I said, the legend of Hiram Abiff. We have broken this overview down into 4 sections. First, Worshipful Brother John Bizak will provide an introduction and overview of Hiram Abiff as he relates to Freemasonry. Secondly, Brother Darren Gullah, member of the Rubicon Masonic Society, will present on the 3 ruffians and what they represent with this degree. Third, Worshipful Brother Dan Kimball will discuss the raising of a Master Mason, as well as the 5 points of fellowship and the lost word. And finally, our special guest, Right Worshipful Brother Chad Lasik from Illinois, will be delivering his Cameo presentation on this topic. Worshipful Brother Bizak, I appreciate you being here this evening and helping to prepare and coordinate this specific topic. I'm pleased to announce the floor is yours. Look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, brother. Good evening, brothers and friends. The outstanding figure in Freemasonry undoubtedly is a character known to our members under the somewhat obscure name of Hiram Abiff. And although his story dominates craft masonry, Members do not learn anything about Hiram until they go through the Master Mason's degree. Now, while it would be improper to reveal the details of the drama that involves Hiram as it is presented in our lodge rooms, or to make public the ritualistic secrets and symbolism which it contains, the story of Hiram is so well known that it's been referred to in Masonic writings so frequently that it's become part of the cultural heritage of civilized men everywhere. But to Masons, the legend of Hiram Abiff is the second part of the Master Mason's degree. I briefly stated the legend is as follows. In the mid-10th century BC, Solomon, the king of Israel, undertook the building of the temple in Jerusalem. He sent to Hiram, king of Tyre, for materials and assistance. In exchange for agricultural products like corn, wine, and oil, King Hiram sent Solomon cedar trees cut from the forests of Lebanon and a skilled, cunning worker in metals. These facts are only found in the Old Testament, especially in chapter 7 and Kings in chapter 2 and 11 of Chronicles. That skilled artisan was named Hiram, not to be confused with the king of Hiram. He's referred to as the son of a widow of the tribe of Naphtali, whose husband was a man of Tyre. Now, this is as much of the Masonic legend as we get about Hiram in the Bible. The Masonic tragedy of Hiram, however, is nowhere to be found except in our legend. The ending of the references to Hiram in the Bible is found in Kings and Chronicles, and it reads, "So Hiram finished all the work he did for King Solomon on the house of the Lord." There's no other mention of Hiram Abiff in the Bible. So while the Masonic legend is intertwined with the biblical story of Solomon's temple, what we find in the Bible, the legend used and known to Masons, is a moral tale that curiously appears in organized Freemasonry between 1723 and 1739, but more specifically 1730. Here's a brief summary of the tale. More than 85,000 workmen were employed in the building of the temple. It took 7 years about to complete. To those workmen who labored faithfully on the project, a promise of the status of master workman was made upon its completion. King Solomon, the king of Tyre, and Hiram Abiff were the only three who knew the secrets of a master mason. And as the temple was nearing completion, 15 of the fellow crafts who presided over the other workers grew angry and impatient because they'd not been given, as promised, the secrets of a master mason. So they conspired to obtain what they were promised by any means, even if that meant violence. At the moment of carrying out their conspiracy, however, 12 of the 15 recanted, but 3 of a more determined and vicious character, as it were, than the others persisted in their immoral plans. Those 3 fellow crafts knew it was the custom of Hiram that each evening at the same hour he would walk through the sanctum sanctorum, and there he'd offer his adoration to the great architect, and he'd view the progress of the work on the temple, and then he'd pass out by the way of the south gate. One evening, the 3 men who were referred to as ruffians in our ritual each took one of the gates with intentions of waylaying Hiram and tried to force the secrets from him. As Hiram passed each gate, each ruffian accosted him in a different way. Now, in spite of their escalating violent threats, followed by a physical assault each time, Hiram steadfastly refused to yield to their respective demand to give up the secrets of a master mason. Instead, he reminded them of their obligations to King Solomon and to his God, and resolutely insisted that they honor the contracts by which he and they were bound. Regardless, each ruffian attempted to force the concessions they were demanding, but Hiram, being faithful to his trust, was more adamant in his refusal to each ruffian, who in turn assaulted him. The wrath and frustration of the third ruffian, who could not force Hiram to tell him the secrets of a master mason, manifested with a blow to Hiram's head, thus slaying him. The 3 ruffians panicked, and they fled the temple. There was confusion at the temple when Hiram was discovered missing the next morning, and Solomon sent fellow crafts to search for him and to search for the 3 missing fellow crafts. The ruffians were found, and so was Hiram's shallow grave. As you know or might imagine, justice was indeed handed down to the 3 ruffians by King Solomon, and that was following a lengthy confession of the 3 ruffians before the craft. Now, there's much more, brothers, to that story. but as I mentioned, it would be improper to disclose more in this forum and platform. And that, brothers, is essentially the Masonic legend of Hiram Abiff, which has become in Masonry one of the most impressive ritualistic dramas of all time. Now, historically minded brethren tonight will continue to wonder from whence came the story of Hiram Abiff, and whose imagination and gifts of language transmitted this ritual into the matchless drama that furnishes the core of the Master Mason's degree. Well, where it originated is not as important as the lessons it offers. And to explore those lessons and a little more about the characters and symbolism of this degree, and particularly this part of the degree, we'll begin with Rubicon member Brother Darren Gullah. Brother Gullah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Worshipful. I hope everyone can hear me well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the ruffians themselves. So as Brother John just pointed out, the most obvious lesson that we can glean from the legend of Hiram is the importance of honor and integrity, even in the face of death itself. Hiram thus is an ideal on whom we should model our behavior. And the newly raised Master Mason, that's certainly the conclusion that is impressed upon him. And because they are certainly admirable traits, which we should emulate in our own daily lives. But is it the principal lesson of the legend? Is there anything more we can learn from the story? So if we examine some of the other players within the legend, we might be able to discover these larger themes, which can make us better men and Masons. The three ruffians in particular provide such an opportunity. So who are these three ruffians? What do they represent, and what can we learn from them? So those are the three questions I'm gonna look at. Now there are many answers and interpretations to these questions, but I'm going to focus on a specific combination that just made the most sense to me. So first, who are the three ruffians? And so the names, their names themselves may actually provide some insights as to who they are. So in his work, Freemasonry, Its Hidden Meaning, George Steinmetz expands upon an etymology of the names of the ruffians that Albert Pike had advanced several years earlier in his Book of the Words, which includes that these men were natives of Tyre. And so Pike breaks down their names in an etymology form, says their Hebrew equivalent names are a combination of Yod, the Hebrew letter Yod, meaning deity, and Bel, referring to the Canaanite fertility god Baal, and then last, that individual identifier. And Steinmetz takes us further and notes that the three ruffians were somewhat unique amongst the other fellowcrafts who all possessed Hebrew names. So that gives us a rough idea who they are. They're fellowcrafts, men of Tyre. And so now we know who these guys are. Maybe we can get some kind of idea of what they might represent. So I stuck with Manly P. Hall's interpretation. Like I said, there's a number of interpretations here. But in his Lost Keys of Freemasonry, he asserts that the three ruffians symbolize three expressions of our lower natures: thought, desire, and action. So these elements of our baser natures form what Hall calls, and this is an interesting phrase, a triangular prison through which, and I'm quoting Hall here, the light cannot shine, and the life is forced to languish in the dim darkness of despair. The three ruffians thus stand in diametric opposition to Hall's flaming triangle of spiritual thought, constructive emotion, and useful daily labor. So these are aspects of our higher natures and are symbolized by King Solomon, King Hiram, and Hiram Abiff himself. So, and this is really consistent with what Steinmetz develops, and where the ruffians, as men of Tyre, worship Baal, the god Baal, which is a material god of a lower realm, of our lower realm, while the fellowcrafts, who are men of Israel, worship Yahweh, a spiritual god of a higher realm. So I like the parallelism that Hall develops there, and looking at these two planes of being and how they represent different aspects of ourselves. So that's why I chose Hall to go with what they represent. So now we have an idea of who they are and what they might represent. Maybe we can extract some additional lessons from the legend outside of the basic Hiram Abiff story. So the late worshipful brother Jim Tresner posits that the three ruffians, and he singles out one of them in particular, pass along larger lessons than the simple Hiram Abiff story of honor and integrity. So Tresner arrives at this conclusion first by suggesting that the legend itself should be interpreted and viewed as a classical tragedy. And this is not a huge assumption on his part. The legend might have originated from medieval mystery plays back in the day, and they would have taken three forms: comedy, history, or tragedy. And just by reading and observing the legend, we know through process of elimination it's not a comedy and it's not a history either. So tragedy makes some sense. And if that's how we interpret and evaluate the legend, there are three components to a classical tragedy. So first, the action in the story comes about because of some character or personality flaw of the people involved. Second, there's some tragic fall and death. And then third, the hero comes to some new understanding of himself. So those three elements are necessary and required for in a classical tragedy. And if we use that framework, well, Hiram probably isn't the hero of the story then. And that is an interesting approach here. So the ruffians themselves might actually represent some these elements better. So one of the ruffians in particular has the character flaw of impatience and a lack of faith and trust. And as the story progresses, he gains insights into his character when he sort of contemplates his role in the death of Hiram. And then he pronounces his own sentence and accepts his death. So this one particular ruffian might better reflect a classical tragedy, a tragic hero. So what can we get from this legend if we view it that way then? So it's really instructing us then to note the flaws of our lower natures that serve to imprison us, so that we can liberate the higher nature that's trapped within us. So in short, we are at the same time Hiram Abiff and the three ruffians. These are two aspects of ourselves, and we're struggling with those to determine who and what we are. So as Freemasons, we must be mindful of our lesser sentiments and strive for that higher nature where we can finish the temple, which is indeed ourselves. So that wraps up my discussion here on the ruffians, and I believe worshipful brother Dan Kimball will take over now.
Thank you, Brother Darren. Good evening, brothers. My portion of this evening's presentation will briefly examine three elements of the legend of the temple. And those three elements are the raising of a Master Mason, the 5 points of fellowship, and the lost word. This presentation, like those preceding it, will only be a cursory overview of these subjects. And they are, of course, worthy of many hours of study and examination, and I certainly encourage you to take the time to undertake such study and examination. Before beginning, allow me to reiterate what you've already heard this evening. Everything about to be presented has appeared in Masonic and non-Masonic books over the last 200 years or more. Unfortunately, very little of it is taught or provided in many of our lodges. To recap what we've learned so far, the legend teaches us that Grand Master Hiram Abiff has been murdered and his body buried in a shallow grave marked by a sprig of acacia. Upon discovery, King Solomon and Hiram, King of Tyre, determined to raise the body so that it can be returned to Jerusalem for a proper burial. Master Masons are said to be raised to the sublime degree of a Master Mason. The raising is not an act of physical resurrection, but a symbolic act of spiritual rebirth. It represents a new life in and of light. It's the alchemy for which men have long sought, taking the base metal of human life, lived in darkness, and transforming it into spiritual gold of life lived with an eternity in view. The legend tells us that there were 3 attempts to raise the body of Grand Master Hiram Abiff. The first attempt to raise the body was done as an entered apprentice Mason, and this attempt failed. The entered apprentice in this context represents the physical or the natural element of man. And while there is indeed strength to be found in the entered apprentice degree, it's insufficient to raise man from his unenlightened state. The second attempt to raise the body was done as a fellowcraft Mason. The fellowcraft in this instance represents the effort of human knowledge to elevate man. And while this strength is not inconsequential, it too is not enough to raise man to a new spiritual life. The third attempt to raise the body is conducted as a Master Mason, and this attempt is successful. In this instance, the strength of the Master Mason represents the combination of the physical world of the entered apprentice, the intellectual world of the fellowcraft, and the spiritual world of the Master Mason. All three elements are necessary to bring about the rebirth of man and raise him to a new level of spiritual consciousness. Here's Carl Claudy's summation of the legend of the temple. The Hiramic legend is the glory of Freemasonry. The search for that which was lost is the glory of life. Never may we find it here. You shall gaze through microscope and telescope and catch no sight of its shadow. You shall travel in many lands and far and see it not. You shall listen to all the words of all the tongues which all men have ever spoken and will speak. The lost word is not heard. Were it but a word, how easy to invent another. But it is not a word, it is the word, the great secret, the unknowableness which the grand architect sets before his children. A will-o'-the-wisp to follow, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Never here is it to be found, but the search for it is the reason for life. The sublime degree teaches that in another life it may be found, and that's why it is the sublime degree. In preparing for this particular presentation, I looked at Carl Claudy's three books, The Introduction to Freemasonry. There's one for each degree, the Entered Apprentice degree, the Fellowcraft degree, and the Master Mason degree. And if you're looking for a place to begin a study of Freemasonry, I highly recommend these books. They're very, very brief. They're only about 60, 75 pages each, but they are an excellent summary of each of the degrees. Master Masons are said to be raised to the sublime degree on the 5 points of fellowship. The 5 points of fellowship, of course, cannot and will not be demonstrated at this time. That does not, however, prevent us from explaining its symbolism and purpose as another important lesson of the craft. I want to begin by briefly calling your attention to the 5-pointed star that you see on the screen. Albert Mackey says that the 5-pointed star is an emblem that symbolizes the 5 points of fellowship. He says it's to be distinguished from the blazing star that we learn about in the Entered Apprentice degree. And that's the only reference I've ever found to the 5-pointed star as being a symbol of the 5 points of fellowship. The 5 points of fellowship reflect the bonds that hold Freemasonry together. They're found in the obligations we've taken and in our commitment to honor them. Freemasonry calls itself a fraternity. The word fraternity has its origins in the Latin word frater, which means brother. And thus our fraternity is a brotherhood or a sacred band of brothers, committed to mutual support, understanding, and affection. That committed is represented by the 5 points of fellowship in the following manner. We have a responsibility to render aid or perform service to our brothers, even when such performance may create an inconvenience for us. We're taught to consider the needs of our brother Master Masons as if they were our own. We have a responsibility to pray for the welfare of our brothers. Regardless of the manner in which we and our brother Masons approach the grand architect of the universe, we're taught to acknowledge his sovereignty and invoke his mighty power. We have a responsibility to be trustworthy men. Our trust in each other is a sacred bond. Our trustworthiness reflects the respect that we hold for each other as men of honor and integrity. We have a responsibility to uphold a brother's good name. Indulging in gossip and spreading idle rumors are acts unworthy of upright men. We defend the good character of our brothers, and by doing so, we also uphold the good name of the craft. We have a responsibility to give good and proper advice to our brothers. Words of encouragement, wisdom, and direction are often all that a struggling brother needs to overcome adversity. We assist each brother in equipping himself for the hardships and the triumphs of his daily journey. The 5 points of fellowship illustrate a Master Mason's responsibilities to himself, to his brothers, and to the entirety of the fraternity. Masonic scholar George Oliver wrote, "Thus by the 5 points of fellowship, we're linked together in one indivisible chain of sincere affection, brotherly love, relief, and truth." Brothers, allow me to remind you that while the legend of the temple is not historically true, it contains a great truth. The Old Testament character Job asked, "If a man die, shall he live again?" The legend gives us the hope and indeed the promise of immortality, that while we shall surely know the pangs of a physical death, the spirit lives on, immortal and indestructible. Possession of such knowledge carries with it tremendous responsibility. The challenge for the individual Freemason, as well as for Freemasonry, is having been so instructed and so enlightened, how will we respond to our duties to God, our brothers, and our fellow man? For obvious reasons, we will not give the lost word. It is, after all, lost. Nor will we discuss any substitutes for the lost word. Perhaps the best analysis of the lost word is found in Albert Pike's Esoterica. Pike wrote that King Solomon, Hiram, king of Tyre, and Hiram Abiff hieroglyphically represented wisdom, strength, and beauty. Together, the three of them were the word. On the death of any of the three of them, that specific representation of the word would be lost forever. Our challenge is not to discover a lost word. That's impossible. The challenge for Master Masons is through the study and pursuit of wisdom, strength, and beauty in our individual lives to come to know that which the lost word represents, and thus possess our understanding of the word as refracted through our understanding of the great architect of the universe. I'll now pass the program back to Worshipful Brother Bizak, who will introduce our Cameo presenter for this evening.
Thank you, brother. Right Worshipful Brother Chad Lasik was initiated, passed, and raised in Dundee Lodge 190 in Carpentersville, Illinois. He's past master of Dundee Lodge and the current secretary. Right Worshipful Lasik is a charter member of Illumination Lodge, number 5 in Bloomingdale, Illinois, and he serves in his second year as Sovereign Prince of the Chicago Council, Prince of Jerusalem, Northern Masonic Jurisdiction. Chad also currently serves as the Grand Lodge of Illinois, member of the Masonic Education Committee, as well as Assistant Area Deputy Grand Master for the Northern Area. He's been with us through the majority of the past 17 virtual meetings sponsored by Lexington Lodge and Rubicon, and he represents one of the many benefits of our virtual assemblies, and that's getting better acquainted with brothers from around the nation. We thank him for his interest and participation in this evening's presentation. And Brother Chad, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Brother John, for that kind introduction. I'm so happy to be here, and it's been a real pleasure to participate and enjoy everything that you brothers over there in Kentucky have done. It's been a real treat, and I'm honored to be here and asked to participate. And so I'll start off by bringing to light, I'm sure some of you brothers in Kentucky are unfamiliar with the ritual in Illinois. We have a very full allegory demonstration of the candidate as Hiram through the entire third degree. I understand in some jurisdictions you have a sort of an abbreviated explanation, and then there's some lectures that go along with it. But I encourage you, brothers, if you ever get the opportunity to come out in Illinois, come see one of our third degrees. It'll probably help fill in some of the blanks for what you're learning here tonight. So all of the symbolism and the ritual in Freemasonry has a surface level explanation. And then there are several deeper meanings that are only available to the thoughtful, to the student, to the seeker. And the beauty of this is whatever secrets exist within the ritual are concealed in plain sight. And that is the wisest place to hide anything. The fact that you don't have to hide it at all is what makes it such a great hiding place. And so imagine in the early days of these rituals and very dense living conditions, and people are in very small communities, it's not very easy to hide writings or meetings and things like this. And so if you're able to show it and the person viewing it who's not supposed to does not discern the meaning, perfect. Which brings me to a description that I think is important to highlight. We talk about the profane. And what we really mean when we say that, profane comes to us from the Latin profanum. It means without the temple. And so if you are uninitiated, you are without the temple. And so it isn't necessarily a derogatory term, but that's where we get profanity. Well, profanity is language that you wouldn't use in the temple. And so the profane is simply the uninitiated. And let's talk about the surface level of the third degree. If a profane were to observe this degree, what would he see? He would see a man who keeps his word, even in the face of danger. He loses his life and is martyred. And that's certainly a interesting lesson. The profane would observe this and think, aha, I've seen this secret ritual. I now understand what it is they're trying to teach. Well, it's important that we consider where these types of lessons came from. In the age of pre-literacy, we had a lot of morality plays, which were designed to teach lessons to uneducated people. And obviously they were kept necessarily very simple. And so the moral of the story is be like the hero, be like the good guy. And so if the hero of the story is brave, well, the lesson of the story is be brave. If the hero resists temptation and sticks to his morality and he's honest, well then these are the virtues that are attempting to be communicated to the viewers of this allegory. So what virtues did Hiram have? He was certainly courageous. He clung to his values. He was trustworthy. He was dependable. He persevered. All very good things. And so even for the Mason who isn't particularly interested in the deeper aspects of this allegory, there's benefit to be had. There's no bad thing to imitate Hiram, even at that superficial level. But it's very important that we understand Hiram dies. And throughout most of the initiatory rite of passage events in all different cultures, there is death and rebirth. And this is very important. So this common theme provides what in technical terms is described as a liminal threshold. And so what that is physically, emotionally, mentally, internally, the candidate entered as a certain kind of person, and he's crossing this liminal threshold, and he is leaving a different person. This is a changed man. The importance of this is it creates the opportunity and it creates the space for that new you to exist. It is a touchstone event that literally provides you a context for the transformation that is intended to happen to you. So another misconception is we talk about Masonry making good men better. And one of the easy ways we can see that a man is a good man is he's doing good things. He's out in the community, he's helping, he's volunteering, he's probably charitable in certain ways. And unfortunately, my brothers, none of that is the sort of work that we're talking about. Virtually all Masonic labor is internal. All of that effort, if done properly, will display itself in external actions. a good man who's doing this internal work will be more charitable, will be kinder, will be a better addition to his community. But those outward examples are just the result of the inward labor. So by all means, brothers, volunteer, help out, lend a hand, but don't think that a couple of hours at the soup kitchen is Masonic labor. That is not the work in the quarries that we are doing. So my brothers, I'm going to ask you right now, we're going to get into some esoteric subjects that are going to require you to stretch a little bit. I want you to stretch mentally with me. It's good for us. And so the best way I've found to explain what I want to ask you to do is, if any of you have ever been on Google Earth, where you can type in your address and you can see the roof of your house. And then with just a few flicks of your finger, you're looking at the whole planet Earth. And hopefully some of you brothers have had that privilege, because it's amazing. And so I want you to think about that, but I want you to go even further. I want you to imagine zooming in till you're looking at a single atom. And I want you to zoom out, and I want you to go past the planet Earth, and I want you to go past the solar system that we're in. And I want you to go so far that we're looking at the Milky Way, and eventually the Milky Way recedes, and the Milky Way looks like it's just one of countless stars in the background. So I want you to stretch yourself and be able to zoom in that far and zoom out that far. And that's the perspective that we're going to need to go a little further in what we're going to discuss. So there's the external and the internal. There's the macro and there's the micro. And if you look at the composition of an atom, if you look at the interactions of all these particles at the smallest level, and you zoom out to the solar system, to the galaxy, the behaviors are shockingly similar. The patterns are similar. They look similar. We've got amazing technology now where we can actually see these things. We've got probes in space. We've got electron microscopes that can literally see individual atoms. We can observe these things. It isn't speculation. And we see that similarity. We see the distribution of matter in the universe looks an awful lot like the neuron distribution in the human mind, in the brain. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that what we can observe as humans on the planet Earth is relevant to what's happening on Venus and in other galaxies and places we can never see, and the smallest and the largest. All of that is teaching us that nature has a particular configuration, and we're part of it, and it's all interconnected. And so the lessons we learn through our observations are scalable, infinitely inward and infinitely outward. And I want you to view the lodge in the same way, because that's what it is. The lodge itself is an external physical representation of the earth, of the universe. It's the physical realm. Internally, when we zoom in, it's a map of ourselves. It's a map of our being. It's a map of the things that make you, you. And so as you move around the lodge, what components do you discover as you are in your first and your second degrees, as you're going through the preambulations? You're encountering various characters. You're encountering various aspects. You're also encountering various challenges. And in the third degree in particular, you're meeting with several obstructions. And we talked about a little bit earlier about these ruffians and the characters that they represent. These characters, brother, represent aspects of yourself, aspects of your own mental or psychical realm that you need to overcome. And we talk about in the first and the second degrees about all the little things that we need to do to get ourselves prepared for that third degree, divesting ourselves of the rough and superfluous parts of our character, governing our passions and keeping them within due bounds. These ruffians, self-doubt, jealousy, and fears, all of these obstacles are aspects of our mental character that we need to conquer. And in the legend of the third degree, we see how that works out. We see that each of us, as Hiram, dies. Or do we? So let's talk about Hiram's activity. What was he building? What was Hiram building? Building a physical temple. What are you building? We're all speculative Masons, right? We're supposedly builders. What are we building? What are you building? So the physical temple is supposed to be a suitable abiding place for God. And it's made by the designs on the trestle board. Well, suitable. It means that it can't just be any old space. It has to be worthy of the essence, the presence of God to abide within it. Well, we are instructed to build a spiritual building. Sometimes it's described as that house not made with hands. Well, where is this temple that you're building? It's inside of each of us. It is likewise meant to be an abiding place, a suitable abiding place for God. Sounds like a big job, a big responsibility. This house that we're building to house this divine spark is created by the natural and moral law. That is our trestle board. So what makes your temple suitable, a suitable abiding place for God? Well, it's mastery of your mental realm, your inner lodge. We have the physical, the mental or psychical, and spiritual realms that we're very familiar with. The physical, we have that inner voice within us. We have a mental relationship with ourselves, with our soul, with our surroundings, and we're all sort of in search of that spiritual realm. And this, brothers, is the path for how we get closer to it. When that inner lodge is free of those passions, that inner voice is quieted, those rough pieces are chipped away, your life in the first degree by the 24-inch gauge and the common gavel is in a position to be a suitable abiding place for God, only then are you even ready to begin to seek out that spiritual realm. Now imagine you wake up in the morning and you run downstairs, you grab a bite to eat, you kiss the wife, you run to work, you're busy all day putting out fires, you come home, you might chat with the kids real quick, you got to run a few errands, you might have a few bites of dinner, you do a couple other things, you have a shower, and you crash face down on the bed exhausted. Where is there room for any sort of higher learning, for any sort of beneficial labor, internal work? There is none. None. Because you're going to get up the next morning, you're going to do it all over again. Only until you've gotten all those other ducks in a row are you even in a position to begin to benefit from this labor. So Master Masons supposedly are permitted to travel in foreign countries. And we say they work and receive a master's wage. Well, the surface level of that is, okay, it's job security. They get to go to various places and work their craft and hopefully earn a better wage. Well, is that the foreign countries that we're really interested in, just going to France or maybe, heading on over to Italy? I don't think so. That travel is in the mental and spiritual realm. The mental, inside of ourselves, quieting that inner voice, mastering our passions, makes us receptive to that divine and spiritual realm. And you have to have the one before you can have the other. The last thing I want to bring up and discuss is this focus on something that's lost. There's all this activity that happens in the second part of the third degree where we're searching for what is lost. We can tell by the fervency of the search that this is valuable. Whatever's been lost is really valuable. It's really important. And we're told it's a lost word. Well, that's really convenient on that superficial level, because it's just a word. All I have to do is get somebody to tell me that word, and I've got it. I'm done. Search over. That's easy to get. But in the allegory, we say, oh, well, we can't get it. We've got to come up with a substitute. It's lost. It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? The word is lost. We can write it down. We can tell it to each other. We don't need 3 people to tell us the word. Is it a word? It can't be found in the physical realm, or we'd have it. And that's demonstrated by all this activity that goes on. They're hunting, they're searching, there's a lot of diligent effort. It cannot be found in the physical realm. They get together and they demonstrate it can't be given either. Not only can it not be found, it can't be given in the physical or the mental realm. Is it lost? Or is it something else? So for those of you familiar with the ritual, when the body of Hiram is discovered, they attempt to raise it. They attempt 2 times and fail. They attempt using what they know of the entered apprentice degree, the physical realm. Does not succeed. They attempt to raise this lost soul, this lost word, this creation by what they know of the fellowcraft degree, the mental realm, the psychical realm, and it fails. And what they then do is pray. And they get together a triune, a 3-part effort. The mental, the physical, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual triune being. And they successfully raise this dead being, this word that was lost, this thing which had been lost. So, my brothers, the legend of Hiram and the thing that was lost is nothing less than faith in our immortality, in the immortality of the soul, and the path through which, while living on earth, we can become closer to that spiritual self, that divine spark that resides within each of us. Worshipful Brother John, I pass it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, brother. As learned Masons know, brothers, it's a mistake to consider the legend of Hiram as history, although some Masons have believed that over the centuries. There certainly was a Hiram Abiff in our history, but the third degree is not a bit interested in him as such. The drama of Hiram is a story of conflict of a man with other men, of an individual against evil forces embodied in other men, and a drama with a moral lesson important in the work of making good men better. Hiram Abiff, my friends, is the dramatized symbol of the human soul, my soul, your soul, and in fact, every man's soul. The work he was engaged in is symbolic of the work in which you and I are committed to perform as Freemasons in the supervision, organization, and the direction of our lives from birth to dissolution. The enemies that Hiram meets are indeed symbols as well, symbols of lust, passions, greed, impatience, and failures of the spirit, which in ourselves and others that make war on our character and our spiritual aspirations. A Mason might sit on the sidelines in our lodge and watch others perform this drama, But no man can be a mere spectator of this drama, friends, because it takes place in our own souls. And likewise, it's intended that your participation in this drama should itself be an experience to prepare you for becoming a Master Mason, by teaching you the secret of a Master Mason, of course, and the message that the soul must rise above its own internal enemies. If ever a man is to be made a Master Mason in reality as well as name. And those who study our lessons will likely agree that the reality of being a Master Mason centers on becoming a master of one's own self. Now, one last thing. There's a reason that 3 enemies of Hiram came from outside of his own circle, or inside his own circle, and not from the outside. And that reason is the enemies to be most feared are always from within each of us. And one of those enemies to each of us is ignorance. Now, some of the lessons from the legend include the importance of honor, integrity, and reputation, and respect for the man who takes these lessons to heart and practices them in favor of his daily life, where he can influence others through his behavior. Brothers and friends, this concludes our presentation this evening. Brother Evans, we turn the program back to you.
Gentlemen, fantastic job. Very well articulated, and we can all clearly see that you have put a tremendous amount of thought, time, and effort and energy into this evening. And I just, on behalf of all of our attendees, I'm sure I'm echoing their appreciation and thank you as well. Right Worshipful Brother Lasik, fantastic presentation, fantastic discussion. I think you explained the day in my life when you said, kiss your wife, go to work your tail off, come home, lay down in bed, do it all over again. So I'm a Master Mason in need of some desperate help and advice on how to fix that, but thank you very much. Brothers, at this time, we welcome open discussion. We welcome open comments. This is the time where we come together and look at everyone on the screen and then challenge thoughts and offer new insights into what was already discussed for this evening's topic. And I might go ahead and just try to get the ball rolling. This is for you, Worship Brother Bizak. So we know the Master Mason degree was not part of Freemasonry prior to 1717. Can you elaborate on where that information has come from and a little further?
Well, we know that in 1730, in an expose that was published, we first hear of Hiram and the legend. Prior to that, there's no mention of it in any of the early texts of Freemasonry. We do know that in 1723, James Anderson, in preparing the Constitution, had extensive endnotes about Hiram. And it's rather curious that he spent so much time talking about Hiram in the endnotes, but he didn't talk about him in the Constitution or any references there. And it's been pointed out recently that it was probably because there was some brewing going on and some percolating of ideas, but they hadn't formulated them into what later became the legend. And several other Masonic scholars have theories as to why it was introduced when it was and how it was copied from the legend of Noah and some early mystery plays in Central Europe. But again, it doesn't really make any difference. We know it arrived. We know it's been practiced since at least sometime before the 1730s. We know it's been fine-tuned. We know it's been elaborated upon. We know it's been butchered in many cases. I'm sure some of you have seen some that have not been very good performances. And in other cases, they've been excellent dramas and very, very committed men presenting them. So I think it's the lesson we get from it today that's even more important than trying to spend a great deal of time ransacking history, trying to find exactly where did it originate, what day, who wrote it, and what was it all about then. I think it's what it's all about now is what's important.
Thank you, Worship Brother. If I didn't make myself clear on how to engage in conversation, Brother David Crickert, I'm going to call on you in just a moment, but you can raise a virtual hand, which will put a blue hand icon on my screen, and I can see virtually that you have something you would like to say. You can also unmute yourself when you feel the time is right to interject your comments, or you're welcome to post your comments in the chat area and I can read them for you. Brother David Crickert, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Worshipful Master. Hello to Worshipful brothers, and Right Worshipful Brother Lasik. So this is going to be a comment, and there's going to be a question hidden in there somewhere. So is this lost word, is it really lost, or do we just not see it? Because you mentioned earlier how things are hidden in plain sight, and we're just not, I guess, our inner eye or our external eye, however you want to look at it, isn't open enough to see this word that should be obvious to everybody, or it should be obvious to us, but we're just not seeing it. Does that make sense, or did I just so?
It does, and I'm going to.
Ball?
It does, and I'm going to pass that to Right Worshipful Brother Lasik to elaborate further on that.
Thank you, brother. I'm happy to, and it's perfect because it really does sort of summarize everything I was trying to say. So, brother, you asked me about this word and if it's lost. Where are you looking for it? That's the question. If you're looking for it in the physical realm, the 3D world that we live in right now, it is not to be found. If you're looking for it within yourself, within your mind, within your consciousness, you will not discover it there. The lessons of the third degree are guiding us to the truth that valuable lost word can only be found, can only be had, can only be enjoyed in that spiritual realm. And it's there waiting for us.
Thank you, Right Worshipful. Brother Krieger, did that answer your question? Anything further?
It did answer my question, and thank you. And can I follow up on another question that sort of is a lot less probably deep, I think?
Certainly.
So the three ruffians, so why were they not bestowed the mysteries of the Master Mason? Is there any explanation to why they weren't, or was I not understanding the story? Is there any reason why Hiram Abiff didn't give the fellow craft the opportunity to be Master Masons after they worked for 7 years? Or is that part of the allegory that we have to, and the story that we have to digest and see ourselves as the ruffians?
Another great question, and I'd like to open that up to the panel. Anyone within the panel that would like to step forward to answer that question specifically?
Well, if no one else jumps in, I will. I love the sound of my own voice. So the answer is that as fellow crafts, they were not entitled to it. They had not yet earned it. And the bigger lesson there is they were told that if they did the following several things, they were given a bargain which they accepted, and they had not yet fulfilled the bargain. They grew impatient. And not only did they grow impatient, they grew murderous, they grew villainous. And so by that demonstration of their not only lack of patience and willingness to honor the bargain that they struck, their transformation into villains and murderers proves that they're unworthy, not only for this word, which will enable them to earn a higher wage in the physical realm, but certainly for any benefits that might come in the spiritual realm.
David, I think when you get to the passed on to fellow craft and you move from fellow craft on to Master Mason, you'll find a lot of the things we discussed tonight. Those kind of answers will come quickly to you.
Brother Brian, can I make a comment here? I think it was touched on in what Worshipful Chad had just said, but it bears emphasis.
Please.
The lesson here is about patience, and it's something that should permeate our practices as Freemasons. These guys wanted to cut out the completion of the task and get the reward. Chasing the reward and being impatient for it are blocks to actually getting the value out of each and every lesson in Freemasonry. That's why observant practices stress taking your time and going through the degrees and all those things we've discussed through this whole series. But patience is a major lesson from the ruffians.
Thank you, Brother Smith. Worship Brother David Osvat.
Yes, thank you. We were just a little bit, but Brother Bizak mentioned Noah legend. I've heard there was a time when that was part of our third degree. Is that true?
I don't know if it could have been a part of the third degree, because we don't know what happened in the third degree until 1730, when it was in the expose. So it's possible there was some variation of it, of course, but we know by 1730 they were practicing the legend of Hiram. Noah was more found in the early Gothic constitutions and the extreme early text of pre-organized Freemasonry.
Worshipful John, there's an entire issue of the Fraternal Review magazine on Noahite Freemasonry, and I think we will document pretty well in that that the in the pre-1717 era there was a time, and we're not certain of the exact places, that there was a degree that was based on that, and Noah passes away without passing on to his three sons the knowledge, the architectural knowledge and the construction knowledge to build the ark.
Yeah.
So you can draw the parallels there, but this was a ritual that was practiced. Exactly when and where is under dispute, but Noahite Freemasonry, go on to theresearchlodge.com and you can get a back copies electronically of our issues, and there's an entire issue there a couple years back on Noahite Freemasonry.
Thank you, Worship Brother. Worship Brother Richard Kovac. Floor is yours.
I'm muted. Sorry, I'm muted.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Just by way of introduction, I am a historian and student of Masonic history, and I belong to the Walter F. Meyer Lodge of Research here in the Seattle, Washington area. And as well, I've written a couple of articles on history of Freemasonry. The last comment on the Noahite Freemasonry, it was partially documented in the Grand Manuscript, which we believe was dated 1724. The Noahite version that was in the manuscript possibly provided either a template or some kind of a way for the third degree to be developed. We know it wasn't developed right off the bat. In fact, Freemasonry was basically one degree until it was the fellowcraft degree was split off early in the history of the Grand Lodge of London and Westminster, which was its first name. And this is not just me, but David Stevenson of England and several other authors have pretty much pinned us down to John Theophilus de Surgoulier, or de Surgoulier, as the author of the third degree drama, and probably of most of the third degree. There was a need to get the other lodges into line with the Grand Lodge of London and Westminster in order to avoid them being pulled away by a so-called Grand Lodge of York or other, upstart Grand Lodges. But it's obviously the most fascinating and most important development in Freemasonry, the manufacture of the third degree. And yes, it's allegory, of course, but it was drawn from several different sources, and this is not the time or place to discuss that. but probably around 1724, it found its first manifestation, because we know that one of the royal lodges, or a lodge in London that had a lot of royals belonging to it, they put on a display of the manuscript of the new third degree in an arts theater. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's been documented. And the Grand Secretary at the time shut that down because it wasn't ready for major dissemination in the London lodges. So there's a lot more to this, and I love it as a historian digging into this, but that's not to take away from what any of these gentlemen said today, these brethren who are, very knowledgeable and gave us just magnificent interpretations of what the various parts of the degree and the life of Hiram Abiff, are meant to represent, nor how the new initiate, taking the role of Hiram Abiff becomes, raised and to be a better man. There's a lot more I have to say, but I'll keep quiet for now. I know what worshipful brother Gula had to say about the ruffian being one of the heroes of the anti-hero of this tragedy. I think he hit it right on. I'm also a 33rd degree Mason, Scottish Rite, but it hit me as soon as he said that. The soliloquy that Jubileum has in the 9th degree. Now that's Southern jurisdiction. I'm not sure about the Northern jurisdiction. I would assume they've got the similar script. But the soliloquy of Jubileum in the 9th degree, Scottish Rite, SJ, is right on. This is the anti-hero after his fall, reflecting on the lessons he's learned. And then later on in the 10th degree, the other two have this sort of epiphany also. So I just thought I'd throw that in for what it's worth. Thank you very much, Fred. This was very enlightening, illuminating, and I sure like to follow up. I just found out about the Rubicon Masonic Society a few days ago and signed up for it. I'm sorry I missed the first 5 parts to this, but I'll stay tuned for the rest of the series and hope to communicate with the society on some of the back issues of their publications. Thank you.
Thank you, Worshipful Brother, for your comments very much. Brother Gullo, do you want to add anything else in addition to what Worshipful Brother Kovac said about the ruffians?
No, I appreciate the words. That was very kind. I do believe, and Brian, you might be able to give Worshipful Brother Richard a little bit more detail, but he can watch our previous episodes on YouTube, I believe. So maybe you could post on the chat room where he could find those.
Yes, all of our previous Rubicon educations, as well as Lexington Lodge education this entire year, are on YouTube. Lexington Lodge 1 has their own YouTube channel, as well as the Rubicon Masonic Society, and all of that information will be sent in emails as well. But a simple search on YouTube for Rubicon Masonic Society will pull up all of our previous videos.
And one thing, Worshipful, I did want to mention real quick. I noted in my talk that there are lots of interpretations of the whole legend and who the ruffians represent in particular. I just picked and choose kind of ones that made sense to me, but some of them I encountered were rather strange. Some of them seem to make some sense possibly, and some of them just seem to be sort of backfitting the Masonic, the Masonic story into history, kind of backfilling and wedging it in. Like, does it represent, are these the guys, the murderers of Thomas Becket, or does the whole thing represent the English Civil War or the murder of Jacques de Molay? And some of those got a little bit out there, and I didn't quite explore them all the way because I knew I was going to go down a rabbit hole there. And I know Pike and then also Manly Hall go on to a very broad discussion, applications of the zodiac and that sort of thing, which was completely unfamiliar to me. So if there's aspects of what we presented that sound interesting, there's lots of things to explore that that you can get out there and poke around. So I just presented a couple that seem to make sense to me.
Thank you, brother. There are a couple individuals that I would like to call on to get their their opinion and discussion on. And Right Worshipful Brother Tom Jackson, I hate to put you on the spot, but I always like to hear what you have to say. Every now and then it's very, very good. And I'm hoping that this will be another one of those times. I'm sure it will.
That's every now and then that happens.
Please.
I thought all the presenters tonight did an excellent job on covering that subject of Hiram Abiff. One thing I've learned, the older I get and the more I listen, the more I learn. There are times that I wish that I could trade what I know now for what I once knew. The presenters tonight really stimulated thought and caused me to do a lot of thinking while I was sitting here listening to them. The Rubicon Society is doing an excellent job in handling these presentations. By the way, I noticed my good friend Ranko was online here tonight. I don't know if he's still on. He's past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Serbia and former ambassador from Montenegro to Germany. Ranko, are you still on?
I'm still on, Tom. Hello, how are you? Good to see you too. Still keeping.
I would think you would have something enlightening to offer.
No, to be very honest, first of all, I find this, as you rightly said, very, very inspiring. I mean, the whole presenters were something totally new to me. And I must say, Rubicon Society is a discovery for me. So I'm just sort of warming up for the future. But it's great to see you all. And I must say, it's like 2:15 in the morning, here where I am, in this part of Europe, but still quite not sleepy as yet. Anyhow, so I appreciate everything what was said, and I'm following future discussions. Thank you, Tom, for thinking of me.
It's good to see you, my friend.
Great to see you too.
Most worshipful Ranko, thank you for being with us this evening and staying up. Hopefully that coffee is still warm.
My pleasure, as usual. Thanks.
Right Worshipful Tom Jackson, before we move on, I am curious. So, not to be able to quantify it, I'm sure, but I'm quite certain you've seen many degree work in your day. Specific to the legend of Hiram Abiff, what was it, without going into any ritual particular details, that stood out to you the most in all of the facets of the degree that you've seen perform all over the world? Is there anything in particular that has stood out to you over others with certain degree work?
Well, the one thing that we have to understand is probably every Grand Lodge is conferring any of the degrees. There's going to be some differences in one jurisdiction from another. Even here in North America, as I'm sure everyone online here tonight is familiar with, there's a great deal of difference in the conferral of each of the degrees. When I received my degree, and certainly the Master Mason's degree, what left a most lasting impression upon me was the actual physical raising that is to exemplify the, although we look at it as a raising of the body, it's the actual philosophical raising of the individual from darkness into true daylight. I was fortunate in when I received all of my degrees to have excellent conferrals, and and you're to have to experience Pennsylvania Freemasonry to understand what I'm trying to convey, because in Pennsylvania there is no dramatic conferral of any of the degrees. It's done totally, almost totally by one individual. The master is the one responsible for the degree work. are others that take part, certainly the wardens and the guide, but the dramatic conferral does not take place like it does under the web ritual here in North America. But the degree certainly left me an impression to the extent that I've devoted the rest of my life to it. I don't know that I can explain it any further, the impact that it had, but it certainly, and as I have emphasized consistently, is Freemasonry's definition of it being a way of life really can become a way of life. And it became totally my life. I don't know if that explains what you're seeking, but
It does. Thank you. Thank you, Worship Brother. I would like to call on Worship Brother Rich Hansen. I have a feeling your wheels are spinning. You have some good information to share.
I appreciate that, Worshipful. Yeah, my wheels are always turning over here. Just a few things that popped out to me, because I always like to take what I've read and what I've studied, and just a few things. There was a brother talking about the ruffians and how he equated that to being patient, dealing with patience. And I've always equated it to like a faith, which is the same as a kind of a patience, just having faith. And we know, those who've read the Bible, the Holy Bible says that, if you complete the work, you will receive the word. And the Bible says that faith without works is dead. So it's kind of representation of, if we have that faith or that patience to do the work, if we complete that work, we will receive what we're looking for. Without that work within ourselves, it's death. It's just the clear representation of what we get. And we all know that this journey is to take that lower nature and to raise it to the divine level of consciousness of God, which is a reflection of the Word. The Bible also says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. So there's just so much translation there for me. And of course, everybody's on their own journey. Everybody interprets it different, like Brother Gola said. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing tonight. Very, very thought-provoking. So it's a great presentation. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you for your comments, Worship Brother. Any other thoughts or comments? To me, what stood out the most, which there was a tremendous amount of quality content, was what Right Worshipful Brother Lasik said, which was, all Masonic labor is internal. And that really stood out to me. And it's something that I know and I could gauge and feel and I think about on a regular basis, but it's also so easily forgotten. And that the temple that King Solomon, that Hiram was building for King Solomon, well, that temple is for God, and our temple is our bodies, and our bodies for God as well, our bodies and our minds. So all Masonic labor is internal really stood out to me, Right Worship Brother Lasik. So I thought that was a very wise comment. Worship Brother Bizak or Worshipful Brother Kimball, do you have anything else you all want to share or pose for our audience this evening?
I don't have anything to add to our presentation tonight, but I would like to take the opportunity to ask. We have roughly 12 brothers from different jurisdictions tonight. Are any of your jurisdictions looking at tightening restrictions or suspending meetings as of right now?
Good question.
None?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Pennsylvania is certainly tightening. I just read the bulletin that came out today. In order to go to a lodge meeting today, you must have your temperature taken. If it's over 100.4, you're not permitted to enter. There is a limitation of 40 brothers permitted to attend a meeting, and they must wear a mask. And there are other restrictions that has been imposed by the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania.
In California, the Grand Lodge still is not allowing any in-person meetings. They've only in the last month authorized stated business meetings with no ritual to be done over Zoom. And they did the Grand Lodge communication at the end of October entirely in Zoom. So we're really holding on, and cases are rising all around.
The Grand Lodge of Nova Scotia in Canada has ceased all Masonic operations in lodge meetings as of this past March, and there is no indication that they will be relaxing the prohibition of meetings anytime soon. As I'm aware that most of the Grand Lodges, if not all the Grand Lodges in Canada, have a similar imposition on in-person meetings. Although the provincial governments may have allowed for gatherings of 50 people or so, the Grand Masters in the various jurisdictions, because of the prohibitive requirements from the Departments of Health to have these people gather, determine that it's just not feasible. So our annual communication in June was canceled, and we'll be very lucky to have an annual communication in 2021. So we are participating in our jurisdiction, the Grand Lodge of Nova Scotia. We were able to have Zoom meetings with non-tiled, no ritual to be followed, just business meetings and educational, similar to what I think Brother Smith has in California. So I'll leave it.
Yes. Brother Bruce, go ahead.
In the Grand Lodge of Ohio, our previous Grand Master finally restricted meetings following the guidelines of the governor of Ohio, and that was 10 people. Temperatures and masks were supposed to be observed. I don't know whether that was done because my wife is a cancer survivor and also a diabetic. I have not been attending meetings. We did hold a few when we were in red zones, and Hamilton County, where I live, Cincinnati, was in the red, and I've chosen just not to go. In October, our Grand Lodge was by Zoom, and except for the Grand Lodge officers, and I am happy to say that our newest Grand Master is from the First Masonic District of Ohio, which is in Southwest Ohio in Cincinnati. So Right Worshipful, or Most Worshipful Brother Rich Dickershide, I'm sure would send his appreciation for the education going on here tonight. Unfortunately, he was very lucky because he got over an exposure, and 2 weeks prior to Grand Lodge, he was exposed and had some symptoms. So we're very grateful that he was able to attend that way and become our Grand Master. And I don't know if any of you knew some of the gentlemen from Southwest Ohio, but Right Worshipful Brother Ed McIntyre just recently passed away, if you knew him. He was a really great Mason, and I'm really sad to see him pass. When he came to my lodge after I had done all the charges, our past Society of Past Masters presents a pin to somebody who's done the charges, and he and another brother presented me with my pin. So I miss him dearly. He was a great Mason. The one thing that I was going to say is, yeah, we have been doing some Zoom meetings, and I remember also we were talking about some of the changes and differences. We have been having the brethren from Scotland come over every couple years, and we have a group that goes over there, and they present the degrees here, we present them there. One of the things that is different is in Ohio, and maybe in your jurisdictions, is the ground between the master and the altar is sacred, and nobody's ever supposed to pass that. In Scottish Freemasonry, that is not. And the one time when they were presenting, one of their men went right across that, and it was in our cathedral, our Scottish Rite Cathedral, and there was this that went out through the whole cathedral because it was different. But that was the difference between their ritual and our ritual, and we had to accept it. You know, that they do celebrate it differently than we do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Rich. Let's see here.
Maybe I could say something about Serbia and Germany, if you
Sure, please.
Agree.
Please.
Well, in Serbia, we are not, all meetings have been suspended, but last month I was in Berlin in Germany and was invited to a lodge for a meeting. The worshipful master hired a doctor who has actually tested us all. We were 22 brethren, and since it takes about 15 minutes for the test, some very fast tests, we were all negative, it was fine. We had a meeting. A week later, at the same lodge, we're supposed to have a candidate, and we started again. All tests were negative, fine, and the last who was supposed to be tested was the candidate. Unfortunately, he was positive. So the whole meeting was cancelled, and practically no meetings are taking place anymore. So it depends actually on the circumstances. It is not totally off, but you know, it gets actually worse and worse from day to day. So now, recently, I have heard there are no more meetings anywhere. I mean, Europe is really bad. Austria, Germany, everywhere. You know, the situation is very, very tough and difficult. But I've been seeing in the States is also not much better. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, that's what I wanted to tell you. Thanks.
Ranko, you said they tested you and gave you the result right away?
Yes, within 15 minutes.
I was tested this afternoon, and they told me I would get my results in 2 weeks.
Well, I don't know what kind of test it is, but there was a German doctor, and he took actually from the throat of each one of us, and the tests were negative. And only after that we could start the meeting. And of course, the next time one of us was positive, so the meeting was dropped. But there are very fast tests. Actually, you have to wait maybe an hour or 2 hours sometimes 2 or 3 days. But the fast tests are some sort of, I don't know how they're called, antigen tests, and it takes only a quarter of an hour and you get the result.
What's your brother, Steve Spence?
Yes, wishful brother Evans and esteemed brethren, just to share a little bit about the Grand Lodge of Canada in Ontario. And we're in the similar position. We have all our lodges are closed, and all of our concordant bodies are also closed. And it's until the 31st of January, and then it will be revisited. And so we're erring on the side of caution. Our most worshipful Grand Master David Cameron is a medical doctor and the head of the, I think, Pathogens Physicians Society of Canada, and so they're just being very careful and erring on the side of caution. And I don't know if it probably similar in some jurisdictions, but a good majority of our members are over the age of 49 or 59, and that's part of the reason as well. But we're hoping that this vaccine and so on will come along soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Worship Brother. Worship Brother Kovac.
Yes, I just wanted to comment and dovetail on what the brother from California said. The whole West Coast is under lockdown. We have some of the strictest restrictions in the country. So Washington, Oregon, California are all in the same boat. There's no meetings, in-person meetings. What business you can do is done by Zoom session or GoToMeeting or WebEx or whatever virtual platform you have. The problem here is that without being able to do ritual to open on the third degree, we cannot do elections, we cannot act on petitions, and the officers have to stay in place for another year. So it's really tough out here in the West. And boy, the Grand Master was going to allow us to loosen up a little bit and have a limited tiled opening starting December 1st, but this second wave of COVID-19 killed that. So now we're on major lockdown again.
In California, the Grand Lodge mandated that we have a November stated meeting on a virtual platform and re-elect officers. The majority of lodges, as I understand it, are re-electing the same officers for the next year because nobody who's been there has been able to do what they would expect to do as an officer, confer degrees and so on. But they did, the Grand Lodge did mandate for all lodges to hold elections, and we went through the same rigmarole. And the issue, of course, is tiling, and in fact, the last of the most recent of the lecture programs that was being co-sponsored by the Grand Lodge of California and Quator Coronade Lodge was hacked, and we had to call it off in the middle because they were trying to just cut out who was doing it, and it turned into a whack-a-mole session, and it dissolved. But I think that really was very chilling as well, in the idea of doing anything that would ordinarily be tiled, but the Grand Master, newly elected, he issued an edict in effect saying we had to do it, and giving very specific guidelines on how to do the stated meetings. So I think most lodges will be continuing now to do stated meetings monthly, but they have to be virtual.
Thank you, brother. Brother Reed Fanning.
In Utah, the Grand Master allowed the lodges to meet in October, but then in November we got shut down. I myself personally made a decision back in March that the Cryptic Masons in Utah could not meet, and have recently made a decision that they could hold their elections over Zoom, or if they so chose, to remain in place. But yeah, it's not much been happening other than virtually out here in Utah.
Brothers, thank you all for sharing your situation, your circumstances. All the more reason why I believe that environments such as this, where men of like mind can continue to come together, where it's impossible for COVID to spread here, it is absolutely and exponentially possible and attainable for education to spread here. And I encourage you all to come back again and again and share your wisdom and knowledge and insights and questions and answers and experiences in this environment while we can. So with that being said, I would like to offer the floor to Worship Brother John Bizak for any final comments in preparation to close.
None, brother. Thank you very much for your coordination tonight on this. Be safe, brothers.
Worship Brother Kimball, any final comments?
Worshipful Brother Brian, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be part of this panel. I certainly enjoyed the presentation this evening. I enjoyed listening to the other members of the panel. Here in the United States, we're in the week of Thanksgiving. We'll celebrate that holiday later. And wherever you are, inside or outside the United States, I hope that meetings like this give us all pause to realize that one of the things that we have for which we can all be thankful is the company of each other through this particular platform. And I appreciate that very much, and I wish each of you a very pleasant holiday.
Thank you, Worship. Worship Brother Lyle Van Outer, it is that time of the evening. Will you please deliver a closing devotion?
Of course. Let us pray, brothers. Great architect of the universe, we offer thanks for the opportunity to meet in the face of adversity. Be with, nurture, and have mercy on all those who are sick and distressed in their lives. May all our efforts bring your peace and beauty, that we may manifest the primal will to good which eternally creates and sustains the universe. Amen.
Amen.
So mote it be.
So mote it be.
Thank you, Worship Brother. Gentlemen, our next meeting is December 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we will be discussing living life as a Freemason. We've gone through all the degrees, and now we are going to come full circle to discuss how to utilize these tools and degrees through life as a Freemason. If you are already on our RSVP list, you do not need to RSVP again. However, you are welcome to do so. If you know someone who may enjoy this series, please invite them to RSVP at rubiconmasonicsociety.com/RSVP. Brothers and friends, it was great to see you all. I do feel as though our bonds are getting deeper and deeper with every meeting. I appreciate your attendance and participation and preparation for these meetings. You have my sincere thanks and appreciation. Happy Thanksgiving to those of you who will be celebrating it, and please continue to stay safe and positive during these times. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next meeting.